Welcome everyone to part 3 of this free no-code series. I've made 2 previous videos about how a no-coder is thinking and how systems or algorithms are actually thinking. If you haven't done so already, please make sure to watch both of them first before you watch this video. So in this video we will talk about inputs and variables. So every strategy runs on 2 kinds of values: the settings you choose before it starts and the memory it updates while it runs. We will dive into the Profectus AI platform later, and then you can see how input and variable blocks are actually used inside an actual system. We ask the question settings or memory. Both inputs and variables store a value. The only difference is when the value is set. So an input is a fixed setting, risk per trade, for example. You want to risk 0.5 or 1% on every trade you take. This value does not change. A variable of the system stores and updates while a system is running. You can take, for example, the high of a previous candle. You can imagine that this price value will change with every new candle opened. Which one do you need? Ask yourself, do I need a changing value or do I want a fixed value while a system is running? So a variable comes alive while a system is actively running. A variable can come forth out of a modified variable block, which I will show later, or a formula. You can make a calculation, for example, the high of a candle minus the low of a candle, and this result in a value which can be stored in a variable block. Alright, right now we are inside the Profectus AI terminal. This is what you see when you start with nothing. Call this a empty canvas, and on this canvas we can drag and drop all the blocks that we see here on the left. In a previous video I talked about the trigger. Well, we can put this block right here, and this is the trigger of our system. So I can change the settings. I can put it on the 4-hour chart, for example, and every 4-hour candle our system will be looking. So this is the trigger, the start of the system. You can see multiple triggers here. So run per tick, which is every second, for example, or run at a specific time during a session. And below that is probably the blocks that you will be using the most, the trading rules. As I said, a strategy needs to be written in mechanical specific rules. And we're not going to write it on paper. We're going to write all the rules here in those blocks. If I open a trade rule block, you can see that it writes the rule inside this block. So if we take, for example, a candle, with a candle, we can compare a candle close with a candle open. In this trade rule, we want the close of candle 1 to be below the open, which signals a bear candle. We can make any sort of rule with those blocks, as long as it is mechanical. Below that, we have the actual trading execution. When do we buy? When do we sell? This comes below part 3 of rules. So here you can see that our system gets triggered. We have a rule, and after that rule is met, we buy. So the logic you must see for yourself is that we run every strategy from top down. We start at the top. If a condition is met, take this green line. Whenever a rule is not met or not answered with a yes, we have this red line and it stops. Then we trigger the system again, in this case on the next 4-hour candle, and this full tree will execute again and again and again. Well, where do variables come into play? Here you see that variables have a pro function, so you'll need a pro account for that. At TTA we have a nice discount with the code TTA10 if you want to purchase a pro account. Let's move on to building an actual strategy. Right here you can see a strategy example of a reversal strategy. So I defined a couple of rules, that's very important, mechanical rules, and I've coded that in Profectus AI. So if we look at the actual candlestick pattern, we see that we need a bull candle followed by an imbalanced candle followed by a bear candle. It's very useful to feed such an idea to Cloud Code, for example, and it constructed this PDF for me, so it will actually give you a visual representation of what a strategy looks like and a couple of the rules. As you can see, it's not perfect. Look at some spaces missing, but it can really help you to understand a strategy before you actually code it in the Profectus AI tool. Well, keep in mind this actual trading pattern. It consists out of specific mechanical rules. Right here, I coded that actual strategy inside Profectus AI. As you can see here, this is our trigger, so it runs on the current time frame, but we can also set that on the 4-hour time frame. The first rule, sit 1 must be an imbalance. So the close of 1 must be below the open of 1, exactly as you see right here. So repeating the logic I mentioned already in a previous video, sit 0 is the actual candle that is forming right now. Sit 1 is the previous candle. And as you can see, close is below the open and we have a bear candle. Well, that rule translated into a block looks exactly like this. It's very useful to give all these blocks a name. You can type here in it if you want, and it gives you an actual representation of every rule below each other. Once a rule is met, so the close is below the open, we follow this green line to the next block. We move down the decision tree till all conditions are met, all rules are met with a yes, and then we sell. As I said before, we have inputs and variables. So here we can also create an input, which is a fixed setting, and we call it risk, for example. We can set it to 1, and boom, we have created an input. Well, why is a input useful? When we are testing in MetaTrader 5 strategy tester, we can optimize on inputs. So we can test easily with a 0.5 or a 1% risk setting. It's easy to change without opening the actual code. I also talked about variables and how they can change over time. A variable is stored after a trigger is met. So for example, we a run per candle and a modify variables block right here. Connect them with a green line. Then you can see right here the inside of a modify variable block. Well, we can use any kind of variable, for example, to store every high of the previous candle. What we do is we create a new variable right here and we name it candle high. It's very important to set its standard value to 0. We start off with nothing, empty at the start. We want the candle high to take a certain value of, for example, a candle high of 1. So candle ID 1 again is this one right here. You can also set that to 2, for example, candle high of 2, and then we take high of this specific candle. Every time we trigger this, so if we look at up at the 4-hour time frame, we look at the high of candle ID 2, and this value will change with every single candle open. Because we move further on in time, the next candle will be opened here, and then candle ID 2 will move to this one. Well, if I delete these blocks right here, I can also easily test the strategy inside the Profectus AI terminal. Right here you can see the test strategy button. You can use the inputs right here. You can test lots of pairs, this list, the time frame and the date, and you click on start backtest. Well, I've already done that before, and this is the actual performance of that strategy. Gives you a brief overview of the performance, the drawdown, all kinds of metrics that we will be discussing in a later video. But it also shows me the chart, and well, the placement of the trades is not perfect right here, but let's dive into this. For example, strategy that I just showed you right here when it was still an ID, we've converted that into specific rules. When all rules are met, you can see here a bull candle followed by an imbalance, followed by a bear candle, and we take a short. And here it exactly executed on that strategy. With this process, you can automate any strategy if you have mechanical rules and knowledge how to construct those rules into Profectus AI code.